In our last video, we talked a little bit about some sculptural elements and how to add those on and how to add a little bit of assemblage onto a mixed media piece along with adhesives. In this video, we're going to talk about collage and paper crafts. Collage is really what people think about when they think about mixed media. So it's basically kind of like the first step in mixed media. When I bring up mixed media to my students, they're always like, oh yes, we know how to do that. We can collage. Well, collage is its own separate element of mixed media, but it's not mixed media as a whole. But we do use it as kind of the gateway to mixed media. So what I tell my students when we start looking at collaging and paper crafting is to gather all of their paper materials first and sort through what they have. So here I have some newspapers and some magazines. And when you have these materials in your classroom, I would suggest kind of sorting through it just to make sure that everything you have is okay and appropriate. Because this one time when you don't want your students to read, they're going to read every single thing that's in front of them. So while they're sorting through their materials and while they're looking for that one specific picture, they're going to stop and read, oh, this is a cute little lavender scallop tree. And they're going to look at how much it costs. And then they're going to look at what store sells it. And then it's going to just lead into this one thing. So make sure that everything that you have is appropriate and that they can look through it without any hidden surprises. So I'm gonna just gather up my things and I'm just gonna grab a few kind of like this color here. Gonna grab a few pieces of magazine paper. And as you're searching through, and you can do this as you demo, search through yourself and say, you know what, okay, I didn't find it, so I'm gonna move on to the next one. I'm not gonna linger here, because if I linger, I know that I'm going to just go down and start looking through things that I shouldn't look through. I don't have time to look through, so on and so forth. So you look through your materials, you gather your materials, and I'm looking for some teal or emerald things to go along with the colors that I already have. And I think that's pretty good. Ooh, ooh. These lips called to me, and I think I'm done. I'm also just gonna tear a few newspaper strips. This is Texas living, y'all. Real authentic. And I found the funnies, so I'm definitely gonna tear that. And I just need a strip, and that's okay. Now you can ask your students to cut them, that's up to you. I like tearing newspaper for a few reasons. When you tear it, it creates this edge, and when you start gluing it down and you start interlocking your strips, because it has a rough edge, it's gonna be a little bit easier for them to interlock. If you cut clean edges, it typically doesn't tend to stay well together. But again, they have to be kind of interlocked, so I have all these strips here. And those are my funnies, and if it hurts you to cut newspaper, I apologize. I'm gonna set my magazine off to the side. I'm gonna use it here in a second. But I'm gonna take this section, and that's where I'm gonna glue my newspapers. Now again, you have to be intentional of how you put things and where you put them, right? So you can glue as you go, or you can plan and then glue. Either way, we're gonna lock down these strips at the end with some Mod Podge, so it's okay. I'm just gonna plan a little bit, just to know that I have the correct shapes that I need. And you can demo this for your students, because the more that you demonstrate, the better they're gonna be. So I planned all of my strips out, and then I'm gonna tear some strips to get into the nitty-gritty here. But I'm gonna start with this big one. And I'm just gonna glue it down. Gonna move it around a little bit to spread the glue out, and I'm gonna get it as close to my edge as possible spread the glue out a little bit, and glue it down. Now I'm going to keep going like this. So that I can get what I need, and if one of my papers sticks out, I'm just going to tear it off and move on to the next piece. And move along, and it's okay if you get glue out of the boundary, that's all right. Remember, mixed media is not about being perfect. It's about releasing as many creative materials on there as it takes to get your piece to a place where you like where it's going. Because eventually we're going to take all of that glue and we're going to use it to seal our piece. So we take all of this extra glue, and if your students do not want to get their hands in glue, that's okay. I usually tell mine that it's going to happen at some point, so they should just accept it and move on. But however you do it with your students, it works for you, that's okay. I'm going to tear one of those pieces off. And then the other one I'm going to reuse up here. Now, we all know that art is messy, so the more that our students understand it, the more that they're going to accept it, the better time they're going to have with it. You can also fold your pieces over if they've overlapped too much. That's what I'm going to do here, because I do not want them to overlap my hot glue that I put there earlier. And now I'm going to start for the smaller pieces. And remember what I said, that all of this is going to get sealed in anyway. So if your glue goes out of bounds, it's okay. You're going to use it and bring it back as a sealant. And I have one small strip in here. And I just need a tiny strip in here. And this will be perfect. Now, there we go. Okay. Now, for the most part, it's all glued down, but there are some edges that are still sticking up that we definitely want to seal down together. That's where your Mod Podge comes in handy. If you've never used it, this is great. It is a sealant, it's an adhesive. You can use it to put over your things, and it comes in a variety of finishes. You can get glittery ones, you can get matte or glossy, but I typically just get matte so that way it doesn't interfere with whatever my students are gonna do. Put a little bit on a palette, or in this case on the cap. I don't let my students do it, but I do it. And then I just seal in a light layer my newspaper. Now once this dries, it'll be one even layer, and the parts where I got on the black will be clear. And it'll dry clear. So I can paint over if I want to, I can watercolor over it if I want to, I can collage some more over it if I really wanted to. The same thing with your magazines. If you really wanted to collage over those, you could. I had a lot of teal and blue things that I wanted, and I would again do the same thing in a smaller section, maybe just all of the blue and the green that I could find. And I like that this has a white edge to it. And it comes in different values. So that one is light, that one's a little darker depending on the shadow. Same thing with this. I would start to plan my way around that. If I can tear some ways around that. And I can do it that way and add as I go. Or I can say, hey, this is a bottom edge. I'm gonna put the edge down here and start building up that way. Again, it's up to you, but you do it the same way. You glue as you go, or you plan and then you glue. It's gonna be up to your student and how they choose to work. But some of the tools I recommend you have on hand when you're collaging: a brush, and I suggest that you have brushes that you are okay with your students dipping into glue. I always say that whenever my students use brushes for glue, that they return them. I have a specific bucket already with warm soapy water so that it washes off all of the glue that's on the brush or all the Mod Podge that is on their brush. So that's part of our cleanup routine, that they will then go drop it off into the bucket, and I know that at the end of the day I'm gonna rinse those out, let them maybe soak a little bit more. But usually I use the plastic brushes for this. They're just a plastic handle, and they have kind of coarser bristles so that I can just go over it. I don't use any of my good acrylic brushes or oil or anything like that. I just use a class set of brushes that I keep for glue. Your Mod Podge, regular Elmer's glue. You can also use glue sticks. Glue sticks, my students find a lot of times is that they don't stick as well, so they like to use liquid glue when they're collaging. Some hot glue sometimes if they want to do some sort of texture on top of their collage, or some heavier glues if it's if it's cardstock or heavier paper. So those are some of the tools that you can use when you're paper crafting. You can also use cardstock, colored paper, copy paper. A great resource to find extra scrap paper that you could use for mixed media: recycling bins in your teachers' lounges. Just make sure that you go through it and it's not anything with sensitive information, or you can just go through it and see if they've left extra colored copies. That's always great. I keep those, in a bin on hand. So those are just a few ways that you can use collaging, and a few things that you can use to kind of stock your collage material bulk up a little bit. Next, we're going to talk about fibers and textiles and how they're used in mixed media.